Hi, welcome to this week's edition of It's an Inside Job with my special guest, Dr Rose Thompson, founder and chief executive of Be Me Against Cancer. Hi Rose, how are we?
Hi Roger, I'm fine, and thank you for having me.
Looking absolutely radiant, I must say.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on to the show and being one of our amazing guests.
As you say, I'm founder and chief executive of the charity Be Me Against Cancer, and that came out of my mother having breast cancer and my twin sister having breast cancer, and finding out I had a family history. So the charity is over 10 years old. It was formerly known as BME Cancer Communities, but there's a real story behind it, and I think that's what we're going to be talking about today, isn't it?
Absolutely. Just to go back a little bit, you talk about family history. How do you find out about that? I mean, obviously, is there some way you can trace this kind of information?
I'm really glad that you asked that, because not many people know about family history. In fact, I just recently had to speak to a GP practice about asking that question when people come and they might have suspected cancer. Because it's really important, and a lot of us as black people and Asian people and people who come from other countries might not know that we have a family history, but it's more common in certain types of cancer, so particularly under the age of 50. And my mother was diagnosed when she was 47. And the other thing is, Roger, that sometimes our forefathers don't talk about it. And I didn't know that my mother had breast cancer, even though I was training to be a radiotherapy radiographer. I didn't know she had it until 6 months before she died.
So she never shared that with you at all?
She never shared that until after it was really obvious. It was my godmother that actually told me. And my mother and I were really close, and I was the oldest at home. One of 8 children, 7 girls and 1 boy.
Wow.
And don't feel sorry for my brother, because he could hold his own. My mother was a seamstress, and I think one of the reasons she didn't share it was because it was 1976. 1976, there wasn't welfare rights and things like that. My dad was a bus conductor. She was a seamstress who was brilliant. I mean, she was haute couture. And everybody used to come to our house for their wedding dresses and their minis and whatever. So she was supplementing his wages.
Okay.
And to stop, basically, there wasn't that option, was there? You just had to earn and keep your family and keep food on the table. But we also came from a faith community, and she was praying for healing.
Right.
So, I did try and persuade her to be checked. My dad did in the end. She had a biopsy, but by that time it was quite far gone. It was in both breasts. It usually starts in one breast. You don't normally go and have 2 at the same time, but it went across to the other breast as well. And it was fairly advanced. So that was a shock for me. But actually spending time with her and listening to her, I kind of began to understand why people make some choices, and also that actually sometimes they don't have a choice because they're excluded from the system where they would get support. So my mother was a bit like that, but she was a joker. She was still joking when, she was ill. I remember she always used to say when people came to pick up clothes or whatever, because we were one of the first families to move out of St Anne's into what was really a white area near to Clifton Estate.
Okay.
My dad, through the partner money, saved up. The house cost $3,000 apparently, and he saved up a good part of the deposit to buy one of the first Wimpy houses.
Wow. All those years back.
Silverdale Estate. And it was difficult because, when you're in a black community, there might be the odd bit of racism, but then when you move to an area that isn't black, that's when you really see it.
But am I right in thinking then you must have been one of the early families that lived on that estate? Because Clifton was always notorious as a very predominantly white sort of area.
Yeah, and we had to walk through Clifton to school. That was an experience. But we were always taught to be us, be proud of who we were. And I think the faith community thing was quite, protective as well. So everybody helped everybody else.
Let me ask you a question. Was Viv Anderson around at that time?
Yes, he was.
Because I remember Viv Anderson being one of the earliest, kind of black people that I knew who came from Clifton.
And Viv Anderson's dad and my uncle were quite close, so we used to see his dad. Didn't see Viv so much. I know that there were others who were footballers as well. But yeah, they were around, and they we kind of didn't know each other closely, but we knew who people were. I remember, you know, there were people in church who were related to Linford Christie as well, and he used to come up and spend time with them. But, you know, it was a really interesting time, and it was a time where we had mentors in our own families, and, you know, I'd say, even though I lost my mother, I had many mothers, you know, because they just looked after you and helped you. But, you know, the charity really came out of losing, after I lost my twin sister to breast cancer.
What was that like for you? Because obviously, you know, I'm assuming at this point you knew about the family history, or was that something that came after your sister?
It came after my twin sister.
Right.
Because I don't think I have to say to any black person or any Asian person who came over in the Windrush time that we were really not experiencing cancer like the cancers that I saw when I was training in '76. I trained for 3 years as a radiotherapy radiographer, and I was the only black one. There are only 4 therapy radiographers, and then the diagnostic side is where people are doing x-rays and diagnostic tests. Well, radiotherapy is 99% treating cancer, and I never saw black people coming through. I didn't see anybody apart from white British people, and I didn't know anybody until my mother had breast cancer. So people did say, well, I don't think we get it. But what we didn't realise is that people were getting it in the country of origin, but they might not have known it was cancer as well.
Right, okay.
So my
So
mother
is that a
was the
fallacy
first.
then? Is that, because I mean, I've heard lots of stories where people have said, you know, it's only when they've come into a westernised environment, the food, the you know, the stuff that they use, the fertilisers, all that kind of stuff has kind of contributed to people, you know, of our ethnicity.
Yeah, the main reason is because cancer is a disease of aging. Actually, the older you get, the more likely you are to develop cancer. So for a young woman in her 20s, it can be, you know, 1 in thousands chance. For a woman over 70, it could be 1 in 15 chance of getting it. So we started aging, and that's when we started to see the increases in it. But my mother was only 47, and breast cancer over the age of 50 at that time in particular was not common. And once you see a cancer in somebody who's younger, that's when you start to ask questions, particularly if there's more than one family member on the same side of the family. And some people have it on both sides. But when I was treating people as a student, I was already seeing, not commonly, because it's only about 5 to 8% of breast cancers, for example, where you see family history. But I was seeing it more in the white British population. I just didn't think, you know, that we were affected so much. And breast cancer is the most common cancer in the black community, and prostate cancer in the men.
Yeah, I mean, that is quite a big one. I can't remember the exact statistics of that in compared to the numbers of Caucasian men. Would you be able to?
Yeah, Professor Frank Chinigwanda, he actually did the first UK study on it in northeast London, and found that black men were 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer. I think one of the interesting things, Roger, is that we found that there is a link between prostate cancer and breast cancer now.
Really? Wow.
So I was always thinking, well, where did it come from in my family? And we also know that in certain populations there's a higher risk of breast cancer. But black men in the UK are 2 to 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Why is that?
One thing we know is that prostate cancer likes testosterone in the same way that most breast cancers like hormones, and that fuels the cells. And when I spoke to Frank, because I wrote 2 reports about black men and prostate cancer, I don't know if you remember, I wrote the Hear Me Now reports that David Lammy launched in the House of Commons.
Yeah.
And the first one, we called it Hear Me Now, or as we say in the Caribbean, Hear Me Now. And the first one, I just raised awareness about it because it wasn't until 2012 when we got the statistics that not only did black men have an increased risk, they were twice as likely to die with it in the UK, in England. And then when I looked at the East Midlands where I was, they were 3 times more likely to die from it. So I just thought I'd better write something about it. And I wasn't expecting it to go so big. It just really went. And we had about 80 odd people in Dining Room A in the House of Commons when we launched it. and it just became a national campaign. I do believe in action.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not just talk.
Yeah.
So my second report was called The Call to Action, and I included statistics in there and references that people who had a responsibility to actually do something about it could use, and we could call them to account as well. And out of that, we managed to have a community clinic. I don't know if you remember, in Nottingham, it was called Check Things Out.
No, I don't.
It was...
Check things out, I like it.
Yeah, my husband and business manager, Lindsay, actually headed it up, and we made BBC News with it as well. And it was going to be called, the professionals wanted to call it prostate cancer risk management.
Oh, wow. That's a bit clinical.
Risk assessment, rather. But we said, no, we need to call it something that the community identifies with. And I actually do a local health radio programme with Christine Bell on Kemet FM.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of joined with them and we did a lot of campaigning and adverts and everything, and we checked over 300 men.
Okay.
And we worked with the urology department, nurses and consultant, and we also worked with GP Lead on Cancer, and it was funded by the Nottingham City Clinical Commissioning Group, which was a first. We ran it for 18 months, we checked over 300 men, and those men, after that, we sent letters to their GPs so that they could be checked annually afterwards. Some of them, we'd already started a support group called Friends and Brethrens, so they were the peer support for those.
This
men
is
as well.
Royden's.
Royden, yeah.
Of course,
yeah.
lovely.
It started with Wayne Marston and Lloyd Ferran, and then Ken Campbell joined, and a couple of the other men. I know that cancer's a serious subject, but like, we had a lot of laughs, you know, because we didn't set it up like a waiting room, we set it up like a sitting room with a coffee table, and you know, if men came in, they were a bit nervous, then the men were there to say, you know, it's okay. But it's something that we're really proud of. And now, what I haven't said is that I developed a pain in 2015, and I knew something was wrong. It was like a burning pain down the side of my breast, and actually I called the family history nurse, and my GP got an appointment and found that I'd got breast cancer. And because I'm a specialist, I thought, well, it's going to be early stage, because my sister Sharon, who we lost 2 years ago, 14 years after she was diagnosed. And I tell people just to stay aware, and also just to make sure that you've had all the treatment that you could have. She wasn't offered radiotherapy, I didn't realise. She lived in a rural area, so it recurred in the same breast. But I found out that I had a tumour that had been hidden from the mammogram, and so it had been able to spread without me realising it, because I was thinking, what is this? It had gone into 7 glands already, and it was classed as stage 3. But you know what, I think because I'm qualified in cancer, and because I know that things are advancing, I didn't have the same fears that other people had. It was just like a call to action again. And so as I was going, I had to go straight into chemotherapy and had radiotherapy and surgery and everything. I was meeting all these women who actually didn't have any support. I'd met a couple before, and together we formed Sisters Against Cancer. And that's a support group that is ongoing now. And just like the men are now an independent charity, so they can just get on with it now. And if I need to signpost men, I signpost them to them. But Sisters Against Cancer is really just a baby in comparison, but they are doing really well. And we're actually attracting women from all over the
Is this
country.
national?
It's actually, we're based in Nottingham.
Okay.
And we're only a small team, but we punch bigger than our weight. And Sisters Against Cancer is doing the same thing, particularly since the pandemic, because there's a lot of people who are isolated and they don't have any support.
I was going to say to you, I mean, you know, if you've got cancer, I suppose it's quite a lonely place if you haven't got anybody there to support you. So you're almost like a beacon of light and hope. So, you know, when you find these people and they do first engage with you, how do you find them? Are they really excited at the fact that there's an organisation that can support and you've all got the same...
They're really desperate.
Yeah.
And normally they will say they've been to other organisations and they didn't have the cultural sensitivity.
Well, this is what Real Talk's about. We need to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
If there's no identification, then how do you feel that you fit in?
Yeah.
You know, you feel different. People, through no fault of their own, they may struggle to engage with you.
Yeah.
You know, because they're not familiar.
Yeah.
You know, so all those barriers can be kind of what stop people from engaging.
Yeah, and I've always signposted people to whatever is there. And then they come back and they say, well, I don't really identify with that. You know, and the group kind of has grown. There's a lot of Black Caribbean women in it, but there's also white British women in it.
Right, okay. So you are multicultural then?
Yeah.
Anybody can go?
Anyone can join it. We always say we don't exclude anyone.
Okay.
Anyone who identifies with us, actually, you know, we even had this thing about, well, why is it only for women and whatever. To be honest, I think the women would actually, as long as somebody identified with us and had a shared experience, they're fine, you know, they actually welcome everybody, and people have been really surprised that we laugh a lot as well, because once you get, I've always said I like to turn tears into smiles, and most people when they first call, you know, they're really, really down, and they've had quite a journey already. So when they do find us, it's not initially, oh, I'm so happy I found an organisation that I identify with, but you know, they just wanted to pour out what they've been through. And at the beginning of each meeting, and I taught the men to do this as well, it's sharing, you know, sharing your experience. How was your we meet every 2 weeks. We've got over 40 women. But, you know, it's been fun. And I know that sounds really strange when you're talking about cancer, but we do laugh a lot. And I've just been talking to them about, Roger, you'll understand when I say night owl, innit?
Yeah.
We don't go to bed, basically. Because most of us are doing things in the daytime. A lot of our women are carers, and especially since the pandemic, they've been caring for elders. They've become carers because some of their carers have had COVID, and we've just had a report. We've just uploaded our report about cancer and COVID, Black patients in particular, because they were 3 times more likely to die from it. Sad to say, top of the league as usual. So we decided just to focus it on the UK Black community and see what their experience was in the first lockdown, and actually to then look at their well-being. So that report has just been uploaded. And what we found was that, you know, I have a friend in the West Midlands who lost his wife, and she was his carer. He had prostate cancer, and nobody expected her to die from COVID. And she was in hospital for 3 weeks right at the beginning, and she passed. She had an underlying condition. So, you know, he became the carer. He became the one who couldn't see his wife in hospital and had 2 grown-up children. But actually, that really has left him really devastated.
I was going to say devastated. I mean, it's also quick. It doesn't. I suppose it doesn't feel real.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, you know, you've spoken about mental health before, and I think one of the things that I've really discovered about doing this is that mental health goes across every condition. And one of the things that we often find, particularly when people first meet us, is that they're depressed. You know, even if it's not clinically measured, you know, we need to look at the whole person, and that's what we do.
So in a very holistic way then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say, when the doctor, I mean, obviously you're a trained, you know, practitioner.
Yeah.
But when, you know, a doctor examines a person and says, right, you've got cancer, what is that like, that experience? Because I mean, it must be absolutely devastating, especially if you get told you're at a stage where it's a 3 or a 4.
Yeah.
What's the first feelings that happen?
Well, even before that, even if people suspect that they've got cancer, because like, you know, when I went for my test, first it was a mammogram, and then I could see that the radiographer was kind of moving my arm around quite a lot and was having difficulty finding it because I'm a radiographer. And then she called me back in and did another one, and then they called me back in and did an ultrasound. By that time, your mind's going, ugh. And that had happened to me before when my twin sister, she was going to the gym, a gym fan like you. I'm not such a gym fan, but I will do like regular aerobics. We started with when we were doing a Hearts and Minds project with Bright Ideas Nottingham. But you know, I need to be motivated with somebody else. But she was going to the gym, she got back pain, she thought it was, she twisted at the gym, and it was about 6 years after she'd been diagnosed. So the GP was treating her for back pain. And it was me that intervened in the end because it went on for so long. But she went through chemotherapy. In fact, she trialled one of the drugs that I was treated with that's very successful now. But shortly after she'd recovered, her hair was growing back, she looked fine, she kept bouncing back, you know, she was like a cat with 10 lives. And she did survive for another nearly 5 years. But there was one problematic bit in her liver that just kept on coming back, and nowadays they can take that out. But my one of the consultants I was working with, he says, if your mother's had it and if your sister's had it, because my sister was diagnosed at the age of 34, twin sister. Wow. And we weren't identical. We were very close, but chalk and cheese. She looked like my mother, I looked like my dad. But we were close. And so the consultant said to me, I'm going to refer you to the leading consultant, which at that time was Prof. Blamey. And I think we just need to get you checked out. I was 41, I think, maybe 42. And so when I went to be examined, I always examined myself. We couldn't find anything. And then when I went for the mammogram, there was a tumour in the middle, deep down again. And then they usually biopsy it on the same day. So by the time you come out, you're kind of reeling a bit. I mean, nowadays you see the breast care nurse afterwards, and I did, but even so, your twin sister's just been through it, your mother's been through it, and your mind just runs away with you. And
how do you manage that? Because, you know, it's an inside job. It's about, you know, talking to people who are inspirational, such as yourself, beacon of light to help others, being selfless. But who cares for the carer? You know, most people who sit here have gone through it.
Yeah.
This present moment in time, are you still going through that process?
I'm still going through it because...
But where do you find it within yourself? Is it your faith?
I was about to talk about that.
Okay.
Because I was brought up in a faith community. I was not one of those people that just follow everybody else. In fact, I was called the rebel. And at 14, I stopped going. And at 15, I went to church to dissuade my twin sister from being baptized. But in the end, you know, I came to my own faith in my own way. And I think that was really helpful that first time, because what I learned that first time with that lump, and one of the things that happened to me was that I was so busy caring for everybody else, I didn't even realise I was pregnant after my twin sister was recovered. And I remember we were going out and I thought I was going into the menopause, and she bought this pregnancy kit and she said, you need to check. And I said, I'm not pregnant. And then I did it and the blue line came up and I was just like gobsmacked. It was 11 years between the last one.
Oh, right, okay.
So she was born just after my twin sister had recovered. And, you know, she was a baby when, you know, I was kind of going for the mammogram. So your mind starts racing away with you. And I think the thing that I learned from talking to people is that fear comes first.
Yeah.
And it's a crippling fear. And you can't control your thoughts. And before you know it, you've got cancer, even though you've not been diagnosed yet, which is why I say to people one day at a time. It's very late stage, and basically, you know, what about your children? What about your husband? What about this, that, and the other? Before you know it, you're at funeral 6 foot under. And I think a lot of people go through that and they're not honest about that.
Yeah.
And in the end, it was so crippling that I said to my husband, who at the time was pastoring. I was born in Nottingham, but I lived and worked in London, met him there. He's actually was growing up in Wales, so he's one of the first black men I met with a Caribbean Welsh accent. I love the Welsh accent. So yeah, I said to him, you know, we just need to agree in faith that this goes, because I cannot live with this constantly in my mind. Plus, I was working with it every day.
Yeah.
And actually, that's what did it for me. You know, just one night, just saying to him, look, you just need to pray for me about this, because it's crippling. And it lifted so much that I remember on the day that I went for the results, it was 2 weeks later, I was with a friend. I remember it was in Debenhams, which sadly is going to go, isn't it?
Mm.
But we were having breakfast together, and she says, isn't it your result today? And she, oh my God, you know, I better get up to the city hospital and meet Lindsay there. And it was negative.
Brilliant.
It was what I tell people this. Black women are also more likely to get fibroids. And you can also get fibroid type tumours in the breast. They're not cancer, they're called benign. And it was like that. And what concerns me about fibroids as well, Roger, because when you are a radiographer, in my time you had to learn about everything, anatomy and physiology and everything, that some black women have been told that fibroids will turn into cancer, but the chances of that happening, tiny, 0.0001 or whatever. And so if you have a fibroid, they tend to biopsy it, and they don't go in there and take it all out and everything, because it's unlikely to do that. So it was a fibroid. So I was fine. But the thoughts were still there. So when people are actually told that they've got cancer, and when I was told, it was August, you remember the dates, don't you?
Yeah.
August the 20th, 2015. And I became mother to my twin sister's girls. She had 2 girls. And her eldest one was actually working with us, helping with administration. And she had 2 girls, and they'd not really been on holiday. And it was really hot summer, and we knew it was going to be a hot day. And so I said, let's just get on the train and go down to Brighton. And I booked a hotel. I said, let's just have a long weekend at Brighton. And the mammogram came on the same day.
Wow.
And so I went, and I think I was with my younger sister, Gillian, because she's my support. But I wasn't really expecting what happened. When I got in to have the ultrasound after the 2 mammograms, the radiologist who was doing it, so that's the doctor who does the x-rays, had actually worked with me for a bit in radiotherapy. And she said, we've seen something, but we can't really see it clearly, so we need to have a look. And when she scanned and said, and I think you've got some glands under your arm, I've been in it for 40 odd years. I wasn't expecting that, because my sister Sharon had had pain. And I'm a bit concerned that some of the women who are coming to us are being told that if it's painful, it's not cancer. It's not common for breast cancer to be painful, but what had happened with the one that I had, it was a 3 centimetre tumour, and it was right on the edge of the breast, between the breast tissue and the muscle, and it was high up, and it was close to the glands, and because the breast tissue comes quite high up, and so nobody could feel it, not even my consultant. Even the breast care nurse who examined me before couldn't feel it. So my sister Sharon had had early stage breast cancer, which on an x-ray you see like little calcium dots. They call it DCIS. And she'd had pain. So having spoken to her, and I think that's why some people who are not BME, they've got more experience because their relatives have told them about how they felt, their symptoms. But I knew that it could interfere with the nerves as well if it started to migrate. So I think that's what was happening with me.
Can I just ask you the question? you know, because I've got to kind of get an understanding of what's inspired you to create your charity. You know, just before we close, because the charity that you've set up now, you know, is designed to kind of really drive this forward. You know, does that feel more real now that you've become a charity?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, I know people say it's better felt than tell. I wouldn't exactly say that, but actually, it's one thing to theorise about it. It's one thing to be a carer.
Yeah.
It's an entirely different thing to actually go through it. And I remember even when, because I decided, I had a choice to either go for surgery or go into chemotherapy. I chose to go into chemotherapy first because of it had already spread, and I know that when you have chemotherapy, you know, it's treated all around the body. And also I knew that the type of breast cancer that we had was more aggressive.
Yeah.
So I chose, and within 2.5 weeks I was in chemo. And that was when I had a talk to God, actually. I said, what on earth is this? And I remember my neighbour, Jean, she was organising a retreat, and I play the keyboards. I come from a musical family. And so she said, there's a place there. I didn't go to play the keyboards. I do it to relax. Been involved with a lot of music, used to sing with my sisters and whatever. But she says, I've created a place for you so you can get a bit of a break before you start your chemo. And so at the last minute I said, can I take my keyboards? And when we got there, the piano wasn't working, so they used mine, and I ended up playing because I was the only one who played by ear. But I remember talking to a woman there about it, and she asked, the woman who was supposed to be the speaker couldn't come up because her husband was taken ill in hospital. So she interviewed me, and she interviewed somebody else about basically the charity and about what I was going through. I remember there's a woman there who spoke to me on the last day, and the night before I was due to go into chemo, I can't even explain this, Roger, because, you know, I know about what you call the placebo effect as scientists, you know, that even talking about giving people sugar pills now and telling them that I don't know how that works, but I read an article about that. I know that if people really believe in something, whatever religion they come from, or faith or whatever, you know, there can be what they call spontaneous healing and others call divine healing. But this was weird because when my family always comes together in prayer, and called a few of my sisters and what to get the night before chemo, and I'm sitting there in the back room whilst they're, you know, we're always doing food, aren't we? So they were in the kitchen doing food. I'm in the back room with my niece who plays keyboards as well. My keyboard is there, and this song that I didn't even know all the words well came to me because I'd heard it. I think it was one of the pastors had sung it at a funeral or something. God will take care of you.
I can't say I know it.
Yeah, it's very old, and I only knew the first verse and the chorus. I said, actually, do you know this song? Because it keeps ringing in my head. And so she didn't, but we sang what we do, and we, my husband and brother-in-law prayed. And then it was the next day I was going to have the treatment. And I'd only met this woman once called Carol at the end of the retreat. 15 minutes we had a conversation. And my sister Gillian came with me, but she was going to work. Say she was going to work at 12 o'clock. My appointment was 9:30. We thought, well, you know, be fine. Enough time to support me. But they just ran late, as sometimes happens in chemo. And in the end, she had to go. So my son was coming to take her place. But there was nobody with me when they called me through to go. And I had my phone in my pocket, and I get up to go, and the phone buzzes. And so I have a look at it. And this woman who I just met had sent me the exact words of the song that we just sang the night before.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
You know, and I just thought, that can't be coincidence. And I'd had a quarrel with God, to be honest. How can I be a specialist and be going through this? Not that I don't feel that I'm anybody more special than others. It was just that it seemed like an interruption
Right.
on the things that we were doing, and, you know, food, nutrition and cancer conferences, and, you know, all the prostate stuff and whatever.
All of this, okay, is one big journey, and it sounds like you've gone through so many different areas within your journey that you're going to give to, you know, be able to support other people. If there was one piece of advice in a very short sentence that you could give to somebody who's going through this difficult time right now about how your charity can help them, what advice would you give them?
It's changing so much. I just feel that people need to find the support that suits them, and we're there for that. We're just about to start a patient advocacy project, and we will be promoting that. But if they want to look at our website, it's bmecancer.com.
bmecancer.com.
Yep. All the contact details are there as well. If they want to email us, it's service@bmecancer.com. But I think it's really, really important to get support. Don't stay there in isolation, because support and advocacy, and if you're going to an appointment, I think this is the problem with the pandemic at the moment. People are being seen alone, and I'm asking the professionals to, now that things have eased, let the carers and the relatives come in with the person. Even if you go for a mammogram, take somebody with you, because if what happens to me happens to you. I remember one patient saying she'd had the mammogram and she came out and she was reeling, and she was so shocked she walked all the way home and left a car at the hospital. Tell somebody about it. Some people don't even talk about it, like my mother didn't. But tell somebody about it and get the right support.
Thank you. Well, as we come to a close of the show, I'd like to say thank you, Dr. Rose Thompson. As I always say, real people, real problems, real solutions. Thank you.
He'll take care